Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the sandals of someone who probably won't see their next birthday, a Roman gladiator. Picture this. You're lying on a thin straw mattress in a cell barely wider than your outstretched arms, and the first sound you hear isn't your alarm clock, but the crack of a whip echoing through stone corridors. The air reeks of sweat, blood, and human waste from dozens of men crammed into spaces designed for half that number. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll have an interesting story for the afterlife. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing our little community spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through the barred window high above your head. The ludus, the gladiator school that's now your prison and workplace, comes alive with the sounds of misery. Somewhere down the hall, a man is coughing up blood. Another is praying in a language you don't recognize. The wooden door to your cell creaks open, and a guard with arms like tree trunks gestures for you to move. No good morning, no gentle wake-up call, just the understanding that hesitation means pain. You stumble to your feet, every muscle already aching from yesterday's training, which felt more like legalized torture. The guard doesn't speak your language perfectly, but his meaning is crystal clear as he shoves you toward the courtyard where your day of potential death begins. The stone floor is cold against your bare feet, and you realize with growing horror that this isn't some historical reenactment you can tap out of. This is your life now. The courtyard buzzes with activity as dozens of other gladiators, in various states of injury and exhaustion, begin their morning routines. Some have been here for years, their bodies carved into weapons of muscle and scar tissue. Others, like you, still have that deer-in-headlights look that screams fresh meat to anyone paying attention. The veterans eye you with a mixture of pity and contempt. They know you're statistically unlikely to survive your first real fight, and getting attached to the walking dead is bad for morale. A doctor, the head trainer, who's basically a drill sergeant with a death wish, strides into the courtyard, carrying a wooden sword and wearing the kind of smile that suggests someone's about to suffer. Historians tell us these men were often former gladiators themselves, but what they don't always mention is how the job seemed to attract people who genuinely enjoyed watching others endure agony. The doctor's job isn't just to train you, it's to break you down and rebuild you into something that might, maybe, possibly entertain a crowd for 5 minutes before dying. Your first lesson comes immediately. You don't eat until you've proven you deserve food. This means completing a series of exercises that would make modern Navy SEALs weep into their protein shakes. You'll swing heavy wooden swords until your arms feel like overcooked pasta. Run laps around the courtyard until you vomit. And practice combat moves against opponents who genuinely don't seem concerned about your welfare. The Romans believed that gladiators needed to be desperate to fight well, and nothing breeds desperation quite constant threat of starvation. The morning sun climbs higher, and you're already discovering muscles you didn't know existed, mainly because they're all screaming in protest. Modern athletes have recovery drinks, ice baths, and sports massage. You have a bucket of questionable water, and the knowledge that showing weakness will earn you a beating from the other gladiators who see your failure as a reflection on their own status. Welcome to the ludus, where every sunrise might be your last, and the only graduation ceremony involves either freedom or death. Spoiler alert, most people don't get to walk across that particular stage. Mess hall, if you can dignify it with that name, resembles something between a prison cafeteria and a pig trough. You shuffle in line with the other gladiators, each man clutching a wooden bowl that's seen better decades. The food being served would make modern prison inmates file complaints with human rights organizations. Your breakfast consists of a gray, lumpy porridge made from barley, the same grain they fed to horses, mixed with whatever vegetables were too rotten to sell in the regular market. Bon appetit. The Romans had a term for gladiators, hordere, which literally means barley men. This wasn't meant as a compliment. While wealthy Romans dined on exotic delicacies like peacock tongues and wine aged in underground caves, gladiators got the nutritional equivalent of cardboard soup. The barley porridge sits in your bowl like wet cement, and it tastes about as appetizing. You'll also get a handful of beans if you're lucky, and maybe some olive oil that's gone slightly rancid. Think of it as the Mediterranean diet's evil twin. But here's where it gets interesting. Modern nutritionists have analyzed gladiator bones from ancient cemeteries, and they've discovered something surprising. These men weren't actually malnourished in the way we might expect. The barley-heavy diet was deliberately chosen because it made gladiators gain weight quickly, not muscle weight, but a layer of fat that would protect vital organs during combat. Historians still argue whether this was intentional medical knowledge or just a happy accident, but either way, your breakfast is designed to turn you into a human cushion. You sit on a wooden bench next to a gladiator whose face looks like it's been rearranged by a creative sculptor with anger management issues. He's methodically spooning his porridge while explaining, in broken Latin mixed with his native Germanic, that the secret to survival is eating everything they give you, no matter how revolting. He points to a newer gladiator who's pushing his food around his bowl with obvious disgust. He'll be dead within a month, your benchmate predicts with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. The water situation is particularly dire. Romans had impressive aqueduct systems, but the ludus gets whatever's left after the good stuff goes to the wealthy neighborhoods. Your morning drink tastes like it's been filtered through a sock that's been worn for several consecutive months. There's a persistent rumor among the gladiators that the trainers sometimes add herbs to the water, not healing herbs, mind you, but substances designed to make you more aggressive or numb to pain. Nobody can prove this, but given that you're literally property owned by someone who profits from you fighting to the death, it's not exactly far-fetched. The mess hall echoes with conversations in a dozen different languages. Romans sourced their gladiators from across the empire and beyond. Germanic tribes, Celtic warriors, captured soldiers from distant campaigns, criminals, and the occasional volunteer who thought this life might be better than whatever they were running from. Spoiler alert, they were usually wrong. You're surrounded by men who have lost everything: their freedom, their families, their futures, and are now bonding over breakfast gruel that wouldn't meet modern standards for pet food. As you force down the last spoonfuls of your meal, you notice the guards watching everyone eat. They're not just maintaining order, they're making sure nobody hoards food or tries to starve themselves to death. Suicide by starvation was apparently common enough that it required active prevention. The guards also watch for signs of food poisoning, not out of concern for your well-being, but because dead gladiators don't generate ticket sales. You're beginning to understand that every aspect of your existence is calculated not for your comfort, but for someone else's profit. The breakfast hour ends abruptly when a horn sounds across the courtyard. Time for morning training, where you'll discover that barley porridge and rancid olive oil don't provide the sustained energy you'll need to avoid being killed by your practice partners. But hey, at least you're not hungry anymore, mainly because fear has a way of suppressing appetite. And what's coming next makes breakfast look like the highlight of your day. The weapons rack gleams with an assortment of implements designed for one purpose: ending human life in spectacular fashion. You're handed a gladius, the short sword that gave gladiators their name, and immediately realize that Hollywood has lied to you about sword fighting. This isn't graceful choreography. It's brutal, desperate hacking designed to open arteries as efficiently as possible. The blade feels heavier than you expected, and your untrained grip would make any self-respecting Roman soldier laugh himself to death. Your training partner for the morning is a Thracian named Brutus, which would be ironic if irony wasn't completely lost on someone who's about to try his best to maim you with a trident. He's been in the ludus for 3 years, which means he's either exceptionally skilled or exceptionally lucky. Judging by the collection of scars decorating his torso like a roadmap of near-death experiences, you're voting for lucky. He sizes you up the way a butcher might examine a particularly unpromising piece of meat, and sighs with the resignation of someone who's tired of breaking in rookies. The doctor explains the rules, which can be summarized as: try not to die, but if you do, make it entertaining. Training weapons are supposed to be wooden, but somehow yours has developed several sharp edges that seem suspiciously intentional. Modern sports have safety equipment. Roman gladiator training has the philosophy that you can't learn to avoid death unless death is a genuine possibility. It's like learning to drive by starting with Formula One racing, except the crashes are intentionally designed to be fatal. Brutus demonstrates a basic attack pattern, moving with the fluid grace of someone who's learned that hesitation equals bleeding. You attempt to copy his movements and immediately discover that your modern lifestyle has prepared you exactly nothing useful in the situation. Your muscles, trained on gym equipment and ergonomic office chairs, rebel against the unnatural movements required to kill another human being with handheld weapons. Meanwhile, Brutus circles you like a shark who's just detected blood in the water. The first practice exchange lasts about 3 seconds. Brutus's wooden sword connects with your ribs in a way that suggests several of them might now be decorating your internal organs in new and creative arrangements. You hit the sand hard enough to taste blood, and the doctor's response is to kick you in the kidney and suggest you try not embarrassing your ancestors quite so thoroughly. Modern athletic training involves gradual skill building and injury prevention. Roman gladiator training involves getting beaten until you either learn or die. And honestly, they don't seem particularly invested in which outcome occurs first. What the history books don't always emphasize is the psychological warfare component of gladiator training. Your fellow trainees aren't just learning to fight, they're learning to suppress every natural human instinct for empathy and self-preservation. The man trying to disembowel you with a practice trident isn't doing it because he dislikes you personally. He's doing it because showing mercy in training means showing weakness, and weakness gets you selected for the fights that nobody expects you to survive. Historians still argue whether gladiators were trained to kill or merely wound their opponents. But from your current position face down in blood-soaked sand, the distinction seems academic. What's clear is that every movement, every technique, every strategy is designed around the assumption that you'll eventually face someone who wants you dead in front of thousands of people who have paid good money to watch it happen. The training isn't preparing you to win. It's preparing you to die in a way that won't disappoint the audience. By mid-morning, you've been struck in places you didn't know could be struck, learned that practice, weapons, can absolutely cause permanent damage, and discovered that your pain tolerance is significantly lower than you'd previously believed. The other gladiators watch your performance with the detached interest of people placing mental bets on your life expectancy. Remember that breakfast gruel from this morning. It's now decorating the sand around your feet, which is probably an improvement to its appearance, if not its smell. The session ends when you can no longer stand upright without assistance. This isn't considered unusual or concerning. It's just Tuesday. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again, assuming you survive the night. And each day, you'll get slightly better at the business of violence, or you'll accumulate enough damage that the decision about your gladiatorial career will be made for you. Welcome to Roman professional development, where the learning curve is steep and the graduation ceremony typically involves a funeral. The ludus operates on a social hierarchy more complex and unforgiving than a high school cafeteria run by psychopaths. At the top sits the Lanista, the gladiator owner who sees you as a walking investment portfolio. Below him, the doctors who train you view your body as raw material to be shaped into something profitable. And then there are the gladiators themselves, arranged in a pecking order based on experience, survival rate, and crowd appeal, where your current position can best be described as human target practice. You discover this hierarchy the hard way when you accidentally sit in the wrong spot during the afternoon rest period. The bench you've chosen apparently belongs to a retiarius, a net fighter, who's survived 12 arena matches and has the scars to prove it. He doesn't explain this politely. Instead, he demonstrates why net fighters are particularly good at making people fall down quickly and painfully. The other gladiators watch with the amused interest of people who have seen this exact scenario play out with every newcomer, and nobody bothers to help you up or explain what you did wrong. At the very bottom of this hierarchy are the Noxii criminals condemned to die in the arena without weapons or armor. They're not even considered gladiators, really. They're just entertainment scheduled for extinction. One step up are the fresh recruits like yourself, who are given weapons primarily to make their deaths more interesting to watch. Above you are the Tyro, gladiators who have survived their first few fights and are beginning to develop actual skills beyond screaming while being stabbed. The real aristocracy of the ludus consists of the veterani, seasoned fighters who have not only survived multiple arena appearances, but have actually developed fan followings. These men live in slightly better conditions, get marginally superior food, and are allowed small luxuries like personal belongings or the occasional conjugal visit. More importantly, they have influence over the training schedule and can make your life significantly more miserable if they decide you're not showing proper respect for their elevated status in this hierarchy of the doomed. What makes this social system particularly brutal is that it's deliberately designed to prevent solidarity among the gladiators. Romans understood that enslaved people who cooperate are dangerous, so the ludus system encourages competition and conflict even during training. Your fellow gladiators aren't your teammates. They're your competitors for the limited resources that might keep you alive another day. That retiarius who knocked you off his bench. He's not just asserting dominance. He's ensuring that you understand your place in a system where cooperation could get everyone killed. The trainers actively foster this competitive atmosphere by pitting gladiators against each other for privileges like better sleeping quarters or additional food rations. They'll announce that whoever performs best in morning training gets to eat first, which might seem trivial until you realize that eating first means getting the portions that haven't been contaminated by the dozen unwashed hands that came before you. These small competitions create resentments and alliances that can determine whether your fellow gladiators will help you or sabotage you when you're facing death in the arena. There's also an unspoken understanding that helping a weaker gladiator survive training might mean creating competition for yourself later. If you teach the nervous Germanic tribesman how to properly hold a sword, he might live long enough to take a spot in a prestigious match that could have been yours. Historians still argue whether this competitive environment actually produced better fighters or just more psychologically damaged ones. But from your position at the bottom of the food chain, the question seems academic. The Lanista occasionally walks through the training areas, evaluating his human inventory with the cold calculation of a livestock dealer. He's not seeing people, he's seeing profit margins and entertainment value. The gladiators he favors get better equipment and more training, not because he cares about their welfare, but because they represent larger potential returns on his investment. You catch his eye for a moment, and his expression suggests he's calculating exactly how much money you might generate before becoming a total loss. Even among the lowest ranks, micro-hierarchies develop based on fighting style, physical size, or perceived potential. The heavily armored secutors look down on the lightly armed retiarii, who in turn mock the exotic fighters with their foreign weapons and techniques. Everyone looks down on the animal fighters, who are considered barely human, and absolutely everyone despises the volunteers, free men who chose this life, and are therefore considered insane by people who were forced into it. Welcome to your new social circle, where being at the bottom means everyone above you has permission to step on your face. The ludus medicus arrives to treat your training injuries with the confidence of someone who learned anatomy by dissecting corpses and considers, first, do no harm to be more of a suggestion than a rule. His medical bag contains instruments that look like they were designed by someone who wanted to combine surgery with creative torture, and his bedside manner suggests he views you as an interesting specimen rather than a patient. Modern medicine emphasizes sterile environments and pain management. Roman gladiator medicine emphasizes keeping you functional enough to die entertainingly in the arena. Your first interaction with Roman medical care comes after this morning's training session left you with what feels like several displaced ribs and a shoulder that's decided to relocate itself somewhere near your neck. The medicus examines you with the thorough attention of someone who's genuinely curious about human anatomy, but not particularly concerned about your comfort during the learning process. He announces that you have a dislocated shoulder, which you could have told him without the extensive poking and prodding that made you question whether he's helping or just enjoying your pain responses. The treatment involves a procedure that would make modern emergency room doctors file ethics complaints without any pain medication, because Roman medicine considers pain to be diagnostic information rather than something to be alleviated. The medicus grabs your arm and yanks it back into place with a technique that's more aggressive carpentry than medical procedure. The sound your shoulder makes as it relocates will haunt your dreams, assuming you survive long enough to have dreams. His satisfied nod suggests this is just another successful day at the office. Roman medical knowledge was actually quite advanced in some areas. They understood anatomy, performed complex surgeries, and had developed surprisingly effective treatments for certain conditions. However, their understanding of infection control was roughly equivalent to modern knowledge of unicorn husbandry. The medicus treats your various cuts and abrasions with honey, which actually does have antibacterial properties, but he applies it with hands that haven't been washed since the last time it rained. and instruments that were last cleaned sometime during the previous administration. Most disturbing aspect of Gladiator medical care is its focus on getting you back into fighting condition as quickly as possible, regardless of long-term consequences. The medicus doesn't care if his treatments will leave you with chronic pain or permanent disability. He cares about getting you functional enough to generate revenue. He explains, with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather, that the honey treatment for your wounds contains ground-up beetles that supposedly promote healing. You're beginning to suspect that Roman medicine is less advanced ancient science and more organized guesswork with occasionally fatal results. The medicus also serves as the ludus's expert on performance enhancement, which in Roman times meant substances that would make you more aggressive or less sensitive to pain. He offers you a mixture that he claims will help with your training performance, but when pressed for details, he admits it contains extract from a plant that might either give you superhuman strength or cause permanent brain damage. Historians still argue whether these gladiator performance enhancers were primitive steroids or just elaborate placebos. But given that you're already facing probable death, the potential side effects seem relatively manageable. Your fellow gladiators share horror stories about the medicus's more creative treatments. One Retiarius describes a procedure for treating broken ribs that involved having metal pins inserted without anesthesia, while a secutor demonstrates his permanently crooked fingers, courtesy of a bone-setting technique that the medicus apparently learned from a veterinarian. The consensus seems to be that minor injuries should be hidden from the medical staff whenever possible, because the cure is often worse than the condition. The ludus also employs several assistant medics who are essentially medical students learning their craft on disposable human subjects. They practice suturing wounds, setting bones, and mixing medicines on gladiators who have no legal right to refuse treatment or seek second opinions. It's like being a participant in medical school training, except the students are learning techniques that were outdated when your grandfather was young, and their mistakes don't just affect your grades, they affect your life expectancy. As the medicus finishes treating your injuries, he reminds you that gladiator medical care is considered a privilege, not a right. You're receiving treatment because you represent a financial investment, not because you deserve medical attention as a human being. He suggests that you try to be more careful in future training sessions, not because he's concerned about your welfare, but because repeatedly treating the same gladiator is inefficient resource management. Welcome to Roman healthcare, where the customer service is terrible, the side effects might kill you, and the bill will be deducted from your non-existent wages. The afternoon sun turns the training courtyard into an open-air oven, and you're about to become the main course. Public training sessions are scheduled during the hottest part of the day, not because Romans enjoyed watching people suffer from heat exhaustion, but because they believed that gladiators who could fight effectively while overheating would perform better in the arena. Modern athletes have cooling towels, electrolyte drinks, and carefully monitored training schedules. You have a bucket of warm water that tastes like it was filtered through a stable floor, and the knowledge that collapsing from heat stroke will be interpreted as weakness rather than a medical emergency. The public begins gathering around the training area like vultures circling a dying animal. These aren't the wealthy Romans who can afford arena seats. These are the common citizens who get their entertainment from watching free training sessions and betting on which gladiators will survive the afternoon. They comment on your technique with the expertise of people who've never held a weapon in their lives, but have strong opinions about how you should be using yours. The crowd's favorite activity seems to be loudly predicting your death, while eating snacks and treating your potential demise as afternoon entertainment. Your training opponent for the public session is a Gallic warrior who survived 8 arena matches and has developed a personal fighting style that can best be described as controlled berserker fury. He's also clearly enjoying the attention from the crowd, which motivates him to make your beating more theatrical than strictly necessary for training purposes. Every time he knocks you down, which happens with depressing regularity, he pauses to acknowledge the crowd's cheers, giving you just enough time to get up so he can knock you down again more creatively. The heat begins affecting your performance almost immediately. Your grip on your weapon becomes slippery with sweat. Your movements slow down as your body tries to conserve energy, and your vision starts getting spotty around the edges. The crowd notices your deteriorating condition and begins placing bets on whether you'll collapse from exhaustion or get knocked unconscious first. Their commentary is helpfully shouted loud enough for you to hear, including detailed critiques of your fighting stance, your apparent cowardice, and your questionable parentage. Romans had specific terms for different types of gladiator failures, and the afternoon crowd is happy to educate you about all of them. When you stumble from dizziness, they shout timidus, coward. When you raise your hand to signal that you're too injured to continue, they respond with missus, dismissed, but not in a good way. When you eventually collapse face first into the sand, they cheer paractus, finished, which in gladiator terminology usually means dead, though in your case, it just means humiliated beyond any reasonable standard of human dignity. The doctor doesn't stop the session when you fall. Instead, he kicks sand at you while explaining to the crowd that this is what happens to gladiators who don't take their training seriously. He's not wrong exactly, but his definition of not taking training seriously seems to include being new to the job and having the physical conditioning of someone who until recently lived a normal life rather than training constantly for mortal combat. The crowd appreciates his educational commentary, especially the parts where he speculates about your likely performance in an actual arena setting. What makes the afternoon sessions particularly brutal is the psychological component. You're not just learning to fight, you're learning to fight while being watched, judged, and ridiculed by people who see your struggles as entertainment. The crowd's reaction to your failures becomes part of your training, teaching you that showing weakness or fear will make you a target for mockery, as well as violence. Historians still argue whether this public training actually improved gladiator performance or just added unnecessary psychological trauma. But from your current position collapsed in the sand, the distinction seems academic. The session finally ends when the sun begins setting, and the crowd gets bored watching you fail to successfully defend yourself against increasingly basic attacks. Your opponent helps you to your feet with the casual courtesy of someone who's just finished a light workout, while you look like you've been trampled by a herd of particularly vindictive cattle. The crowd disperses, discussing your performance with the critical analysis usually reserved for theatrical reviews, except their reviews focus on your probability of surviving your first real fight rather than your artistic merit. As you stumble back toward the Ludus buildings, you overhear a conversation between two spectators who have been taking notes on the afternoon's training session. They're discussing which gladiators show promise and which ones are likely to provide entertaining deaths in upcoming matches. Your name comes up briefly in the context of that new one who might last 5 minutes if he's lucky, which is apparently considered optimistic commentary given your afternoon performance. Welcome to Roman afternoon entertainment, where you're both the performer and the punchline, and the reviews are written in betting odds rather than newspaper columns. Evening brings the harsh reality that you're not a person anymore, you're a commodity in a business model based on public execution for entertainment. The Lanista calls a meeting to discuss upcoming arena events, and you quickly realize that the gladiator industry operates with the cold efficiency of modern corporate management, except the quarterly reports are measured in survival rates rather than profit margins. Your life expectancy is literally calculated in spreadsheets, and the numbers don't look particularly optimistic for someone with your current skill level. The Lanista explains the economics with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a promising new investment opportunity. Gladiators are expensive to purchase, train, and maintain, but a successful fighter can generate enormous returns through arena appearances, private exhibitions, and endorsement deals. Yes, ancient Rome had gladiator endorsements. Successful fighters could earn money by promoting products or appearing at wealthy citizens' private parties. Unfortunately, reaching that level of success requires surviving long enough to develop marketable skills, and your current trajectory suggests you'll be lucky to survive long enough to develop basic competence. Your market value is determined by factors that would make modern HR departments uncomfortable. Physical appearance matters. Romans preferred gladiators who looked impressive even when they were losing, because dying dramatically requires a certain aesthetic appeal. Fighting style is crucial. Some combat techniques are more popular with audiences than others, and crowd-pleasing gladiators get booked for better matches with higher survival rates. But most importantly, your value depends on your ability to generate audience engagement, which in gladiator terms means either winning spectacularly or dying in a way that makes the crowd feel they got their money's worth. The business model relies on a careful balance between gladiator mortality and audience satisfaction. Too many deaths make gladiators expensive to replace. Too few deaths make the matches boring and reduce ticket sales. The Lanista has calculated optimal death rates for different types of matches, and he discusses these statistics with the casual tone of someone analyzing inventory turnover. He mentions that novice gladiators like yourself have approximately a 60% chance of surviving your first year, which sounds encouraging until you realize that means 40% of people in your position die within 12 months. Romans had developed sophisticated methods for maximizing the entertainment value of gladiator matches while managing their human resources efficiently. Experienced gladiators were paired against novices in ways that would create dramatic, but not necessarily fatal encounters. The crowd wanted to see skilled combat, not just mindless slaughter, so matches were often choreographed to provide maximum excitement while preserving valuable fighters. Unfortunately, as a novice, you're more likely to be cast in the role of dramatic victim than skilled combatant. The Lanista also explains the various types of gladiator contracts and career paths, which sound almost reasonable until you remember that they're discussing different ways you might die for other people's entertainment. Some gladiators are purchased as short-term investments, cheap fighters expected to provide a few exciting matches before inevitable death. Others are developed as long-term assets, receiving better training and equipment in exchange for longer service periods. Then there are the specialty fighters, who develop unique skills or personas that make them particularly marketable to specific audiences. What's particularly disturbing is how the business treats gladiator injuries and deaths as operational expenses rather than human tragedies. The Lanista maintains detailed records of injury rates, recovery times, and mortality statistics for different fighting styles and opponents. He can tell you exactly how much it costs to train a replacement gladiator, how long it takes new fighters to become profitable, and which types of matches generate the highest profit margins. Your death would be recorded in his ledgers as a business loss, calculated against the revenue you generated during your brief career. The evening meeting concludes with assignments for upcoming matches, and you learn that you've been scheduled for your arena debut in 2 weeks. This isn't presented as good news or bad news. It's just business information, like being told your shift schedule or project deadlines. The Lanista mentions that novice gladiator matches are typically scheduled as warm-up events before the main attractions, which means you'll be performing for an audience that's still arriving and not paying close attention. Apparently, dying during the preliminary matches is considered less prestigious than dying during prime time. As the meeting ends and you return to your cell, you're left with the understanding that every aspect of your existence has been reduced to financial calculations. Your training, your equipment, your opponents, and ultimately your death are all business decisions made by people who see you as a revenue stream rather than a human being. The Romans have created an entire industry based on turning human suffering into public entertainment, and you're now a small but expendable part of that machine. Sleep well, knowing that tomorrow you'll continue preparing for a career that's literally designed to end with your death in front of thousands of cheering strangers. The evening hours at the Ludus reveal that even relaxation time is designed to maintain the atmosphere of casual violence and desperation that defines gladiator life. What passes for recreation includes gambling with dice made from human bones, arm wrestling competitions that regularly result in dislocated joints, and storytelling sessions where the most popular tales involve creative ways that previous gladiators have died. Modern people unwind with Netflix and comfortable furniture. You get to choose between activities that might injure you and activities that will definitely psychologically scar you. The gambling is particularly vicious because gladiators have almost nothing to bet with except personal possessions, food rations, and promises of future favors that may never need to be fulfilled if the promiser dies in the arena first. You watch a Germanic tribesman lose his only spare tunic in a dice game, which means he'll be wearing the same clothing until it literally disintegrates or he dies, whichever comes first. The winner celebrates with the enthusiasm of someone who's just acquired treasure, even though we're talking about a piece of cloth that wouldn't meet modern standards for use as a cleaning rag. The storytelling sessions serve as both entertainment and psychological warfare. Veteran gladiators share detailed accounts of famous arena deaths, describing exactly how various fighters met their ends and what their final moments looked like. These stories are presented as educational material, learning from other gladiators' mistakes, but they function more like horror stories designed to remind everyone of their probable fate. The most popular tales involve gladiators who showed cowardice and died badly, serving as cautionary examples of what happens to fighters who don't embrace their role as public entertainment. Physical competitions during recreation time are barely distinguishable from training, except they're technically voluntary and slightly more likely to result in permanent injury because there's no doctor supervising to prevent gladiators from getting too enthusiastic about proving their dominance. You witness an arm wrestling match between two secutors that ends when one participant's arm snaps with a sound like a tree branch breaking. The winner helps carry the loser to the medicus, but the atmosphere suggests this is considered normal recreation rather than a medical emergency. Romans believed that gladiators needed to maintain their fighting spirit even during downtime, so recreational activities were designed to reinforce competitive instincts and aggressive behavior. Board games existed, but the Ludus versions typically involved betting that could lead to fights, and the fights could lead to injuries serious enough to affect performance in upcoming matches. Even something as simple as sharing a meal becomes an opportunity for conflict when gladiators compete for the best portions or argue about seating arrangements based on their position in the Ludus hierarchy. evening also provides time for gladiators to maintain their equipment, which sounds mundane until you realize that your life depends on the condition of your weapons and armor. Equipment maintenance becomes a meditation on mortality as you sharpen the blade that might save your life or oil the leather that might prevent a fatal wound. Historians still argue whether gladiators were allowed to sabotage each other's equipment, but given the competitive atmosphere and the fact that your death means one less competitor for limited resources, you find yourself checking your gear obsessively and sleeping with your weapons within arm's reach. Religious activities also play a role in evening recreation, though gladiator spirituality tends toward the desperate rather than the devout. Small shrines to various gods dot the ludus, where gladiators leave offerings and pray for survival, victory, or at least a quick death. The most popular deity among gladiators is Nemesis, goddess of revenge and divine retribution, which tells you everything you need to know about the mindset of people whose job description includes die entertainingly for strangers. You watch hardened warriors pray with the fervor of people who genuinely believe they'll be dead within days, because statistically speaking, many of them will be. The ludus also provides opportunities for gladiators to dictate final messages to scribes, since literacy rates among fighters are roughly equivalent to their life expectancy, disappointingly low. These farewell letters to family members they'll probably never see again serve as evening entertainment for gladiators who gather to hear particularly moving or dramatic final words. It's like a poetry reading, except all the poems are about impending death, and most of the poets won't be around to receive reviews of their work. As the evening winds down and gladiators begin settling into their cells for what might be their final night's sleep, the recreation period ends with the same abrupt authority that governs every aspect of ludus life. Guards patrol the corridors, not just maintaining order, but listening for signs of escape attempts, suicide planning, or gladiators forming alliances that might threaten the competitive atmosphere the Lannister works so hard to maintain. Your recreation time has successfully prepared you for another night of anxiety-filled sleep, punctuated by nightmares about tomorrow's training and the growing certainty that your arena debut is approaching faster than your skill development. Welcome to Roman evening entertainment, where even relaxation is designed to remind you that you're probably going to die soon. Sleep becomes impossible when you're told that tomorrow's training session is actually your final preparation before your arena debut, scheduled for the following day. The cell feels smaller somehow, as though the stone walls are slowly closing in to match the narrowing timeline of your probable survival. Other gladiators who have received similar news pace their cells like caged animals, and the sound of restless movement echoes through the ludus corridors all night. Modern people suffer from pre-presentation anxiety. You're experiencing pre-death anxiety, which is considerably more intense and significantly less treatable with breathing exercises. Veteran gladiators offer advice with the helpful enthusiasm of people who have survived similar situations and want to share their wisdom before you potentially die and make their experience irrelevant. Their tips include practical suggestions like try not to trip over your own feet, and remember that the crowd likes confidence, even if you're terrified, mixed with more philosophical observations like dying with dignity is better than living without honor. None of this is particularly comforting, especially since the Gladiator, offering the most detailed survival advice, is missing 3 fingers and has a scar across his throat that suggests his own arena experiences haven't been uniformly successful. The pre-arena ritual includes visits from the Ludus priest, who offers spiritual preparation for your upcoming match. Roman religion was notably practical about death, acknowledging that sometimes people die in unpleasant circumstances and need divine assistance to handle the transition gracefully. The priest's blessing sounds suspiciously like last rites, and his advice focuses more on how to die honorably than how to survive successfully. He mentions that gladiators who show courage in defeat sometimes earn posthumous fame, which is the kind of consolation prize that sounds better in theory than in practice. Your final meal before the arena is marginally better than usual Ludus food, which isn't saying much, but represents a gesture of respect for gladiators who might not survive to complain about the next day's breakfast. The improved rations include actual meat, not just the mysterious protein substances that normally pass for nutrition, and wine that's only slightly diluted with vinegar. It's like a last meal on death row, except instead of being executed privately, you'll be killed in front of thousands of people who have paid money specifically to watch you die. The evening brings an unexpected visitor, a scribe who offers to record any final messages you'd like to send to family or friends. This service is provided free of charge, which initially seems generous until you realize it's another aspect of the gladiator business model. Relatives of dead fighters sometimes pay substantial sums for their loved ones' final words, and the Ludus takes a percentage of these transactions. Your potential death has been monetized in ways you hadn't even considered, turning your final thoughts into another revenue stream for the people who own you. Fellow gladiators share their pre-arena superstitions with the desperate intensity of people who genuinely believe that small rituals might influence life or death outcomes. Some fighters refuse to eat certain foods before matches. Others insist on specific equipment arrangements, and nearly everyone has developed personal prayers or ceremonies designed to court favor from various gods. These superstitions would seem irrational in normal circumstances, but when your survival depends on factors largely beyond your control, magical thinking becomes a reasonable coping mechanism. The Ludus medicus makes his rounds, checking gladiators for injuries that might affect their arena performance. This isn't medical care in any compassionate sense. It's quality control to ensure that the entertainment product meets minimum standards for audience satisfaction. He examines your various training injuries with the clinical interest of someone evaluating merchandise before sale, and his comments focus on whether your wounds will make your fighting more or less visually interesting, rather than whether they'll affect your health or comfort. As the night progresses, you begin hearing the sounds of arena preparation from the direction of the Colosseum. Workers are setting up seating, preparing the sand, and testing the mechanisms that will release wild animals or create special effects during tomorrow's matches. The distant noise serves as a constant reminder that thousands of people are actively preparing to watch you potentially die, and they're approaching the event with the same practical efficiency they'd bring to any other public entertainment. Sleep becomes even more elusive when you're listening to the sound of your own execution being organized. The final hours before dawn bring a strange combination of terror and resignation. You've moved beyond the point where training or preparation can significantly improve your chances. Tomorrow's outcome will depend on factors like your opponent's skill level, the crowd's mood, and pure random chance. Some gladiators spend these hours in prayer, others in final conversations with fellow fighters, and a few in complete silence as they try to mentally prepare for whatever tomorrow will bring. Welcome to your last night as someone whose death is still theoretical rather than scheduled entertainment. Dawn arrives with the subtlety of a funeral march, and the ludus explodes into activity as trainers, armorers, and officials prepare gladiators for the day's entertainment. You're awakened not by gentle encouragement, but by guards who treat you with the efficiency of people preparing livestock for market, which, from their perspective, is essentially what's happening. Modern athletes have pre-game rituals and mental preparation. You have armor fitting and what amounts to a final inspection to ensure you'll provide adequate entertainment value while dying. The armorer approaches you with equipment that's been selected not for your protection, but for visual appeal and fighting style compatibility. Romans categorized gladiators into specific types: retiarius, secutor, murmillo, threeks, each with distinctive weapons and armor combinations designed to create interesting combat matchups. You're being fitted as a secutor, which means you'll wear a large rectangular shield, carry a gladius, and fight with your head enclosed in a helmet that severely limits your vision. This equipment choice wasn't made to maximize your survival chances. It was made to create visually appealing fights against net-wielding retiarii. The armor-fitting process reveals the practical realities of gladiator equipment. Your helmet weighs approximately 20 pounds and turns your field of vision into a narrow slit, making it nearly impossible to see attacks coming from your peripheral vision. The leg guards are designed to protect your shins while leaving your thighs exposed, creating opportunities for dramatic but non-fatal wounds that will entertain the crowd without immediately ending the match. Everything about your equipment prioritizes spectacle over survival, which is exactly what you'd expect from an industry based on turning human combat into public entertainment. The pre-arena meal consists of foods believed to enhance fighting performance, which in Roman medicine meant substances that would make you more aggressive or less sensitive to pain. Gladiator breakfast includes honey for quick energy, barley for sustained strength, and various herbs that may or may not have actual medicinal properties, but definitely taste like they were chosen more for their exotic origins than their nutritional value. You're also offered wine mixed with what the trainers claim are performance-enhancing additives, though given Roman understanding of pharmacology, these could range from genuinely helpful to actively poisonous. The psychological preparation involves reminders of gladiator honor codes and expectations for arena behavior. The doctor explains that showing fear or cowardice will result in a more painful death, as the crowd will demand extended suffering for gladiators who don't fight courageously. Conversely, displaying skill and bravery, even in defeat, can sometimes earn mercy from the audience or respect that translates into better treatment during your final moments. It's like receiving customer service training, except the customers have paid to watch you die and will be disappointed if you don't meet their entertainment expectations. Fellow gladiators scheduled for today's matches gather in a staging area where the atmosphere combines the tension of people facing probable death with the camaraderie of soldiers preparing for battle. Conversations focus on practical concerns like weapon maintenance and tactical advice, mixed with gallows humor and final personal messages for anyone who survives to deliver them. The veterans offer last-minute fighting tips with the generous spirit of people who understand that helping you survive doesn't diminish their own chances. Today's matches will have predetermined outcomes based on crowd expectations and business considerations rather than pure combat skill. The Ludus priest performs final blessings with rituals designed specifically for people who are about to risk violent death for public entertainment. These ceremonies acknowledge that gladiator combat serves both religious and social functions in Roman culture. The matches honor the gods while providing cathartic release for citizen audiences. The priest's prayers request divine favor for honorable combat. And if death is inevitable, courage to face it in a way that brings credit to your training and respect from the watching crowds. Officials arrive to conduct final inspections of weapons and equipment, ensuring that everything meets arena standards for safety and entertainment value. This inspection process isn't designed to protect gladiators from injury. It's designed to ensure that weapons will function properly for maximum visual impact, and that armor will provide adequate protection to prevent matches from ending too quickly. The officials approach their work with the professional competence of people who have spent years perfecting the technical aspects of organized human combat. As the morning progresses, you can hear the growing crowd noise from the direction of the Colosseum as spectators begin arriving for the day's entertainment. The sound builds gradually from scattered conversations to a continuous roar of voices, punctuated by the calls of vendors selling food and souvenirs related to gladiator matches. 50,000 people are gathering to watch you potentially die, and they're treating the event with the festive atmosphere usually reserved for holidays or celebrations. The realization that your death would be considered a successful conclusion to their day out creates a psychological pressure that no amount of training could have prepared you for. The final hour before departure brings equipment checks, last-minute tactical discussions, and the kind of nervous energy that comes from knowing you're about to face a situation where skill, luck, and crowd mood will determine whether you see another sunset. Welcome to arena day preparation, where every detail has been calculated to maximize entertainment value, while you prepare for what might be the final performance of your very short gladiatorial career. The tunnel leading from the Ludus to the Colosseum feels like a birth canal in reverse. Instead of emerging into life, you're walking toward a space specifically designed for your potential death. The stone walls amplify every sound. Your labored breathing, the clanking of armor, the shuffled footsteps of gladiators who are trying to maintain dignity while walking toward what might be their execution. Modern athletes enter stadiums through tunnels decorated with inspiring messages. Your tunnel is decorated with scratched graffiti from previous gladiators, including several messages that end mid-sentence, suggesting their authors didn't survive to complete their thoughts. The roar of the crowd becomes overwhelming as you approach the arena entrance. 50,000 voices create a sound like continuous thunder, punctuated by individual shouts, musical instruments, and the general chaos of a massive crowd that's worked itself into excitement about the prospect of watching people fight to the death. The noise isn't just loud, it's physically oppressive, pressing against you like a living thing that feeds on violence and spectacle. You realize that these people haven't gathered to watch athletic competition. They've gathered to watch human beings potentially die. And they're approaching the event with the enthusiasm usually reserved for festivals. The arena floor stretches before you like a stage set for tragedy, covered with fresh sand designed to absorb the blood that everyone expects will be spilled during the day's entertainment. The sand isn't just functional, it's part of the visual presentation, providing a clean backdrop against which combat injuries will show up clearly for audience enjoyment. Roman engineers calculated the optimal sand depth for absorbing blood while maintaining firm footing for fighters, because even the ground you'll die on has been specifically designed to enhance the entertainment value of your death. The crowd's reaction to your entrance provides immediate feedback about your entertainment potential. Experienced gladiators receive cheers from fans who recognize their fighting styles and appreciate their previous performances. Novices like yourself receive a different kind of attention. The crowd sizes you up like livestock buyers evaluating potential purchases, making audible comments about your physique, your equipment, and your obvious terror. Their reactions aren't personal. They're treating you like any other form of entertainment, evaluating whether you'll provide good value for their ticket prices. Your opponent enters from the opposite side of the arena, and the crowd's response tells you everything you need to know about the expected outcome of your match. He's a veteran Retiarius, whose fighting style and equipment are specifically designed to counter your secular loadout. And the audience clearly has favorite gladiators they expect to see perform well. The betting odds, shouted by bookmakers in the stands, suggest that your survival is considered unlikely enough to offer attractive returns for anyone optimistic enough to wager on your success. The pre-match ritual includes ceremonies designed to honor the gods and provide religious context for the violence that's about to occur. Gladiator matches weren't just entertainment. They were religious observances that served important social functions in Roman culture. The rituals acknowledge that the combat you're about to engage in has spiritual significance beyond mere spectacle. Though this elevated purpose doesn't make the prospect of dying in front of thousands of strangers any more appealing from your personal perspective. Arena officials inspect your equipment one final time, ensuring that everything meets standards for visual appeal and functional effectiveness. They're not checking to protect your safety. They're ensuring that your weapons will work properly for maximum entertainment impact, and that your armor will provide enough protection to prevent the match from ending too quickly, while still allowing for the dramatic injuries that crowds expect from gladiator combat. Every aspect of your equipment has been calculated to optimize the entertainment value of your potential death. The signal for combat comes not with gentle encouragement, but with the blaring of horns and the crowd's expectant roar. Modern sports begin with national anthems and ceremonial first pitches. Gladiator matches begin with the understanding that someone might die in the next few minutes for the entertainment of people who have paid good money to watch it happen. The arena floor, which seemed impossibly large when you first saw it, now feels claustrophobically small as you realize there's nowhere to run and no way to avoid the combat that everyone expects you to pursue with enthusiasm. Your opponent approaches with the confident movement of someone who survived multiple arena appearances and understands exactly how this type of match typically unfolds. He's not approaching you with personal animosity. This is just his job, and he's a professional who takes pride in his work. The crowd's noise reaches fever pitch as the actual combat begins, and you realize that everything up to this point has been preparation for these moments, when your survival depends entirely on skills you've barely had time to develop, luck you can't control, and the entertainment preferences of thousands of strangers who see your death as a successful conclusion to their afternoon out. The clash of weapons creates a sound that cuts through the crowd noise like a knife through flesh, and you immediately understand that all your training has prepared you for exactly nothing. Your opponent moves with fluid efficiency that makes your desperate defensive movements look like a child playing with toys, and the crowd's reaction tells you that your obvious inexperience is providing exactly the kind of entertainment they were hoping for. Modern combat sports have referees who stop fights when participants are clearly outmatched. Gladiator matches continue until someone is too injured to fight or too dead to continue, and the crowd is betting on which outcome you'll provide first. The Retiarius's net whistles past your helmet with a sound like angry wind, and you realize that your restricted vision makes it nearly impossible to track his attacks effectively. Each defensive movement feels clumsy and delayed, while his offensive patterns flow like choreographed dance, designed to systematically dismantle your ability to fight back. The crowd appreciates the technical skill differential, cheering for particularly clever attacks, and groaning dramatically when you manage to avoid what should have been finishing strikes. They're not cheering for you, they're cheering for the entertainment value of watching you slowly lose the ability to defend yourself. Your first serious wound comes when the trident finds the gap between your leg armor and your belt, creating a puncture that sends hot blood running down your thigh and into your sandal. The pain is immediate and overwhelming, but what's worse is the crowd's enthusiastic response to the sight of your blood on the arena sand. They've been waiting for this moment, the transition from theoretical combat to actual injury, and their excitement suggests that your wound is entertainment rather than a medical emergency. The betting odds shift audibly as bookmakers recalculate your survival chances based on your blood loss rate. The psychological impact of fighting while being watched by thousands of people who want to see you injured creates a mental pressure that no amount of training could have prepared you for. Every stumble, every defensive mistake, every sign of weakness generates crowd reactions that make it clear you're failing to meet their entertainment expectations. You're not just fighting your opponent, you're fighting the weight of all those watching eyes. The knowledge that your death would be considered a successful conclusion to their day out, and the growing certainty that your skill level is insufficient for the situation you're in. Historians still argue whether gladiator matches were typically fights to the death, or more like modern boxing matches with predetermined outcomes. But from your current position bleeding onto sand that's been specifically prepared to absorb human blood, the academic debate feels irrelevant. What's clear is that everyone present expects you to continue fighting until you're physically incapable of continuing. And the definition of incapable apparently includes significant blood loss, multiple wounds, and the kind of exhaustion that makes standing upright a major accomplishment. Your opponent pauses the combat periodically to acknowledge crowd reactions and build dramatic tension, giving you brief moments to appreciate the full horror of your situation. You're providing entertainment for people who see your suffering as recreational activity, performing in a space specifically designed for human combat, surrounded by architecture built to optimize the viewing experience for spectators who've paid to watch you potentially die. The Roman Empire has created an entire industry based on turning human desperation into public spectacle, and you're currently the featured performer. The match reaches its climax when you make a desperate attack that leaves you completely exposed, and your opponent's response demonstrates why he survived multiple arena appearances while you're making your first and possibly final performance. The crowd's roar becomes deafening as they witness the decisive moment, and you understand with crystal clarity that your gladiatorial career is about to reach its conclusion in a way that will satisfy everyone present except you. But even if you somehow survive this match through luck, divine intervention, or your opponent's uncharacteristic mercy, the psychological trauma of having fought for your life while thousands of people cheered for your potential death will mark you permanently. The Romans have created a form of entertainment that transforms human beings into products, and even successful gladiators carry the mental scars of having been reduced to spectacle for others' amusement. As consciousness begins fading and the arena noise becomes distant, you realize that your brief gladiatorial career has taught you something profound about human nature and the capacity for civilized societies to create systematic cruelty. The crowd's satisfied murmur suggests that your performance has met their entertainment expectations, which is probably the closest thing to success you could have achieved in this situation. The sand beneath your face feels surprisingly cool, and the crowd noise begins to fade into something almost peaceful, like distant ocean waves. Your breathing slows, your vision narrows to a small circle of blood-stained sand, and you find yourself thinking not about the pain or the fear, but about how strange it is that your final moments are being shared with 50,000 strangers who see your death as entertainment rather than tragedy. The Roman sun feels warm on your face, and the last sound you hear is the crowd's applause for what they consider a satisfactory conclusion to the afternoon's entertainment. Sleep comes gently now, like a soft blanket settling over your shoulders, carrying you away from the noise and the pain and the terrible understanding of what humans will do to each other for entertainment. The arena fades into shadow, the crowd's voices become whispers, and finally, mercifully, there is only silence and the peaceful darkness that welcomes all gladiators, regardless of whether they won or lost their final fight. Rest now, knowing that your story has reached its end, and let the quiet embrace you like an old friend who's been waiting patiently for your return.